Imagine the future Queen of England sitting entirely alone in a heavily guarded private room, looking directly at a highly polished, sterile script meticulously prepared by 17 different royal communication secretaries, and aggressively pushing it aside to speak raw, unfiltered, and deeply shocking truth to the entire world. When Princess Catherine courageously broke decades of rigid, unbreakable palace protocol to reveal the terrifying, hidden reality behind her family's months of mysterious public disappearances, she shattered the blinding illusion of the British monarchy in a way no one ever saw coming. If you want to uncover the dark, deeply emotional, and horrifyingly suppressed truth behind the sinister silence that held the royal family hostage, hit that subscribe button right now, because the chilling reality behind Prince Louis's private struggle will leave you completely speechless. For grueling months, the global public was left completely in the dark as official royal engagements were abruptly cancelled. Schedules were frantically rearranged, and the youngest, most energetic prince mysteriously vanished from public view entirely. Behind the closed doors of Windsor Castle, Prince William fought aggressively to enforce an absolute, unbreakable wall of silence, firmly believing that total secrecy was the only armor strong enough to protect his 6-year-old son from the relentless, vulture-like media scrutiny that haunts royal children from the moment they are born. But what the world didn't know was that behind those majestic gates, a terrifying medical nightmare was violently unfolding. What initially seemed like a simple, harmless seasonal infection rapidly mutated into severe, agonizing respiratory complications that left young Prince Louis entirely depleted of life, pushing away his breakfast in silent exhaustion and clutching his little chest while whispering to his terrified father that he was simply too tired to eat. The absolute point of no return a moment, Catherine would later describe as the darkest turning point of her life, exploded during a private, unpublicized rehearsal at Windsor. Intended as a gentle, quiet trial run to prepare Louis for a return to public life without cameras or screaming crowds, the morning took a horrific turn when the little prince suddenly froze, reached out for his mother's hand, and desperately gasped that he couldn't catch his breath. As Catherine dropped to her knees in pure panic, feeling how icy cold his tiny fingers had become, despite the warmth of the room, William instantly went into hyper-protective survival mode, frantically clearing all staff and ordering George and Charlotte to be whisked away so they wouldn't witness their brother struggling for his life. But as the physical crisis slowly stabilized, an even more terrifying psychological tragedy began to take root inside the palace walls. The heavy, suffocating silence intended to protect Louis was aggressively tearing the family apart from within. Young Prince George began asking haunting questions about whether silence meant his brother was in mortal danger, while Princess Charlotte quietly left handwritten jokes beside Louis's bed, desperately trying to bring back the laughter of the brother she loved. And then came the ultimate heart-shattering revelation that completely broke Catherine's soul. 6-year-old Prince Louis had slowly begun to internalize the secret, believing with all his heart that he was being hidden away from the world because his own royal family was deeply ashamed of him. That devastating psychological realization unleashed an explosive, unprecedented war inside the royal residence, triggering a fiercely intense late-night confrontation between Catherine and Prince William that would forever alter the history of the House of Windsor. As the royal children slept in their quiet bedrooms, Catherine placed her raw, handwritten pages on the table right beside the sterile, palace-approved draft that had been meticulously sanitized by high-ranking communications advisors to protect the crown's flawless image. For hours, the atmosphere inside the room was suffocatingly tense as William, consumed by a terrifying fear of losing control over his family's privacy, desperately argued that releasing a deeply personal statement would invite a brutal storm of international speculation, forever tethering their son's vulnerable recovery to media commentary. But Catherine fiercely refused to back down, her voice trembling with maternal fury as she pushed the official draft away, confronting William with the heartbreaking truth that their absolute silence was no longer protecting their son, but actively destroying his fragile self-worth and convincing him that his illness was a mark of familial embarrassment. She revealed to a stunned William that Louis himself had made a desperate, heartbreaking request. The little boy desperately wanted to publicly thank the extraordinary medical team who had saved his life. He wanted his older brother and sister to know their quiet support mattered. And above all else, he refused to let the world believe he had vanished because he wasn't brave enough to face them. That agonizing revelation completely shattered William's protective armor, bringing the future king to his knees as he covered his face in pure emotional exhaustion, openly confessing that his rigid obsession with secrecy had been driven not just by duty, but by his own sheer terror of failing as a father, with the parents finally united. The emotional battle moved to the ultimate authority of the British monarchy, King Charles himself. Sitting alone in his private study after an evening briefing, the king read Catherine's raw handwritten statement twice, dramatically taking off his glasses when he reached the chilling line about a child mistaking privacy for shame. Senior communications officials aggressively pleaded with the monarch to reject the personal message in favor of a safer, heavily censored public bulletin that completely removed Louis's personal wishes to protect the institution. But King Charles, deeply shaken by the profound emotional truth of the words, forcefully overruled his advisors, declaring that a statement stripped of the child's own courage would protect the crown while disastrously failing the human heart at its center. Charles gave his absolute approval on one non-negotiable condition. Young Prince Louis had to hear every single word of the statement himself and give his own personal consent before it was recorded. Sitting quietly beside his mother as she read the text aloud, 6-year-old Louis listened with profound seriousness, gently correcting one specific phrase because he didn't want the world to just think he was doing better. He wanted everyone on earth to know he was getting strong again. When Catherine's calm, deeply emotional recorded statement was finally broadcast across the globe, it unleashed a massive, unprecedented tidal wave of public emotion that completely redefined the relationship between the British monarchy and the world. Within hours, despite aggressive media outlets desperately attempting to dissect past footage and analyze every single second of Louis's past absences, something profoundly miraculous began happening outside the historic gates of Windsor Castle. Thousands of ordinary families, deeply touched by Catherine's rare maternal honesty, began leaving a breathtaking sea of handwritten blue paper stars along the stone barriers, each bearing the exact 6-word phrase young Louis had insisted on inserting into the official statement, "Getting strong again." Windsor Castle, a centuries-old fortress that had witnessed historic coronations, royal weddings, and tragic national mourning, was suddenly transformed into a glowing sanctuary of hope and shared human empathy, proving that Catherine's brave honesty had touched millions of suffering families far beyond the royal estate. But the true, life-altering victory of this unprecedented ordeal didn't happen under the glaring lights of international television or inside high-level palace strategy sessions. It happened quietly inside the sunlit private garden room of the residence, where Prince William found his youngest son sitting entirely alone. Stripping away all regal formality and royal posture, the future King of England sat directly on the cold floor to look into his son's eyes, softly asking Louis how he felt now that the dark secret was finally out in the open. In a quiet, heartbreaking whisper, Louis confessed that he had noticed how everyone always stopped talking about royal events whenever he entered the room, making him feel as though his illness had permanently erased his place in the family's future. And then, the young prince revealed a secret that completely broke William's heart. During the absolute worst week of his medical battle, Louis had laid awake in the dark and heard his father sobbing uncontrollably outside his bedroom door, pretending to be asleep only because he didn't know how to comfort a terrified future king. That profound confession broke down every remaining wall of emotional restraint inside William, as he pulled his little boy into a fierce, tearful embrace, openly explaining that true bravery does not mean hiding your pain or pretending to be indestructible, but having the immense courage to speak up even when fear makes silence feel so much easier. Bound together by absolute truth and unconditional love, the family discarded all staged PR appearances, allowing Prince Louis to make his gradual return to public life entirely on his own terms. When he finally stepped out to attend a quiet, unpublicized community gathering, there were no fanfare trumpets, no formal speeches, and no press demands, just a little boy walking proudly forward, holding Princess Charlotte's hand on his left and Prince George's hand on his right. Placed safely beside Louis's bed, one single blue paper star from Windsor Castle remains to this day, carrying a simple message that will echo through royal history forever. You were brave even when you were resting. This unprecedented, deeply human moment permanently shattered the archaic, suffocating tradition of royal stoicism, proving once and for all that the modern monarchy's true power lies not in untouchable, cold perfection, but in raw, relatable, human vulnerability. Princess Catherine didn't just protect her beloved son from the devastating psychological wreckage of royal isolation, she completely revolutionized the entire future of the British crown, ensuring that no royal child will ever have to suffer in the terrifying darkness of shame ever again. If you were completely blown away by this incredibly emotional, hidden reality behind the palace gates and want to stay constantly updated on all the shocking, deeply guarded secrets of the royal family as they continue to develop, make absolutely sure to smash that subscribe button